The village of Greyhollow was known for two things: the bitter fog that never lifted, and the ruined chapel that stood in its center, a place where no birds flew and no children played. They called it Saint Eltha's Whisper, though no one remembered who Saint Eltha was. The name was older than the stones. Older, perhaps, than the village itself. And one evening in early autumn, the bells began ringing. No one had touched them. There was no wind. Just a sound, clear, pure, and terrifying, because they had not rung in 200 years. I arrived the day after the first toll. Not by choice. My mother had died 3 weeks earlier, and in her will was a single line I couldn't explain. When the bells return to Greyhollow, so must you. I'd never been there before. She never spoke of it. But I packed my things and took the night train, alone. The conductor didn't speak when I bought my ticket. The name Greyhollow passed like ash across his lips. The town was colder than expected, and it smelled like stone that had never known sunlight. The innkeeper eyed me like something dead had walked through his door. "You came for the bells?" "I think so," I said. "You shouldn't have." I stayed in the room above the tavern. Dust coated the bed in a familiar pattern, as if someone had once lain there nightly and vanished mid-breath. I found my mother's name carved on the windowsill. Not her full name. Just E. Marrow. It looked centuries old. But it couldn't be. Could it? I asked about the chapel the next day. The grocer's wife crossed herself. The baker slammed his shutters. Only a blind man at the well dared to speak. "They sing again," he whispered. "Just as they did before the flood." "What flood?" "The one that never happened. The one the land remembers and the people don't." He reached into his pocket and gave me a coin. It had no markings. Only a face, faint, eyeless, mouth open in a perfect circle. "Give it to her when she asks." At dusk, I walked to the chapel. It had no doors. Only arches choked with ivy and a broken altar beneath an open dome. Rain had eroded the saints' faces from the stone, but one still remained, a girl with a harp of ribs and a crown of hollow eyes. No plaque. No date. Just a smell of burned hymns. I stepped inside, and the bell sang again. One note. Low, deep, and then a child's voice, faint as breath. "You've come too late." I spun. No one there. But the shadow on the far wall no longer matched the columns. It was taller, thinner, moving. I ran. Back at the inn, I opened my mother's box. The one she'd left under the words in her will. Inside, an old photograph. Black and white. Faded. It showed her as a child, standing before the same chapel, smiling. But beside her stood 3 other children, all with their faces scratched out. And the chapel bell was mid-swing. I didn't sleep. Not really. Because at midnight, I heard it. Not from the village, but from beneath the floorboards. The sound of children singing. 1 for the silver, 2 for the choir, 3 for the girl who walks through fire, 4 for the bell that never fell, 5 for the secret we'll never tell. Then silence, except for the sound of a rope creaking in the beams above. In the morning, I asked the innkeeper who the other children were in the photo. He stared too long. "You shouldn't have brought that here," he said. "She listens through paper." "Who?" "Saint Eltha. If that's even her name." "What happened to the children?" "They joined the choir." "What choir?" He only shook his head and whispered. "The pale choir. The one that sings when time forgets to breathe." I walked the outskirts of the village. Found a graveyard swallowed by mist and time. No names, only stones worn smooth. But one grave was different. Fresh flowers, a locket, and a name barely visible. Eleanora Marrow. My mother. Buried weeks before. But the soil felt ancient. And someone had etched something new at the bottom of the stone. She sang the 5th verse. I awoke with the taste of dust and blood on my tongue. My window had been opened from the outside. A light rain had soaked the sill, and on the floor beneath it lay 4 damp feathers, each chalk white and too long to belong to any bird I knew. And then I heard it, beneath the floorboards again. 6 for the girl who won't look back. 7 for time's unfinished track. Children's voices. Thin. Flat. As if sung by throats without lungs. I dressed quickly, laced my boots, and left the inn. Outside, Greyhollow was utterly silent. Not a single crow. No bark of dogs. Even the wind was still, as if listening. I passed the blind man again. He was singing softly, but not words. Just breathless vowels in a forgotten rhythm. When I tried to speak to him, he flinched. "Don't answer the music," he hissed. "It only asks once. If you answer, you're counted." Counted for what? But he only held up a hand. 8 fingers raised. Then covered his ears and wept without sound. The chapel called again. Its ruins now seemed too intact, somehow less broken than yesterday. The ivy had receded. The altar stood straighter. The stones, cleaner, as if it were remembering itself. I crossed the threshold, and saw, for the first time, the stairwell. It hadn't been there before. It led downward, into impossible dark. Above it, carved into the wall, were the words, "Here descends the echo of those who sang too late." The air turned colder with each step. Far below, I began to hear it, not just voices, but instruments. Flutes made of bone. Drums that pulsed like heartbeats. A harp stringed with hair. And beneath it all, a voice, not human, but singing through dozens of borrowed mouths. It sang without language. But I understood its meaning. You are the last verse. And you are already written. The stairway ended in a circular chamber, lined with pews made of kneeling figures turned to salt. Their heads bowed. Mouths open. And sitting at the front, as still as a statue, was my mother. Or what had once been her. She looked up. Her eyes were black mirrors. Her lips didn't move, but the chamber echoed with her voice. "Why did you come?" "You told me to," I whispered. "In the will. You wrote." "That wasn't me." She stood, joints cracking like old wood. I died in silence. But silence is never empty. "What do you mean?" She found my grief. She gave it song. Then, suddenly, her voice changed, deeper, layered with hundreds of others. "Join the choir, daughter. Sing the hour that never came." The walls shook. From behind the pews rose children, or what remained of them, faces blurred, bodies pale and bent unnaturally. They moved without sound. Their mouths gaped open, but their song filled the air, growing louder. And I remembered the rhyme. 8 for the ones who sang below. 9 for the breath you'll never know. I ran. Back up the stairs. The walls closed behind me, but I made it to the chapel floor. The bells tolled 9 times. Each one struck my bones. The chapel darkened, not with shadow, but with unwritten memory. The wind returned, and it screamed through the trees like it was chasing me. At the inn, the innkeeper waited outside. He looked different. Older. His eyes bloodshot, face pale. "You brought it closer," he said. "She's down there. My mother. And things. Yes. They've always been there. Then why stay here? Why not burn it down?" He looked at me with something close to sorrow. "Because Greyhollow is not a place," he whispered. "It's a chord. A final note, struck too long ago, still ringing. We don't live here. We resonate." He handed me a letter. "She left this with me. For when you returned." I opened it. Inside, my mother's handwriting. "If the choir sings the 9th verse, you must find the one who refused to sing. Only she can stop the refrain. Her name is Ansel. She wears no face, but remembers yours." I asked the innkeeper. He went pale. "Ansel was the first," he said. "A girl buried before the church was ever built. She refused the hymn. They say she walks the fog. Where do I find her? Not where. When? That night, I returned to the graveyard. Under moonlight, the fog pulsed. Once, twice. And then a figure stepped from it. A girl with no face. But somehow, I recognized her. Because she wore my reflection, just slightly wrong. Do you want to silence the choir? She asked. Yes. Then come with me. But you must bring no time. No name. No memory. Why? She tilted her head. Because she feeds on all three. The girl with no face took my hand. Her fingers were cold, like winter wind trapped in a glove made of flesh. As soon as I touched her, the world stuttered. The trees bent sideways, frozen mid-sway. Clouds reversed direction. And the chapel bell stopped mid-ring, its sound suspended like a sword above my head. She turned to me, though I still could not see her face. You must leave your name, she said. What? Your name carries weight. And she listens for it. Who is she? The girl only lifted her other hand and pointed upward. Not to the sky, but to a rift above the clouds, where the stars had been scraped away. We walked through Greyhollow, but it wasn't the same village. Shadows bled backward here. Houses were half-built, half-rotted. People flickered in and out of view, echoes of those who never returned. What is this place? I asked. The silence between Greyhollow's heartbeat, she replied. The town between ticks. She led me to the edge of the forest, where a cottage stood, abandoned, but alive. The door opened before we knocked. Inside, dried herbs, broken clocks, an altar of feathers and teeth. An old woman sat by the fire, spinning thread from what looked like fog. She still sings, the woman said without looking up. And the verse is almost finished. Who are you? I asked. Once, I was Ansel. Before she took my name. I stared at the girl beside me. The woman smiled. That's not me. That's the part of me that refused. The fire crackled. Time unraveled across the ceiling like cobwebs. The pale choir sings when the dead don't know they're dead, Ansel whispered. They sang to my brother first. He followed the music into the well. He never climbed back out. What do they want? Not want. Need. A voice to finish the final song. And if I don't sing it, then it stays unfinished. And so does time. The girl took a mirror from the hearth. But no reflection showed in its glass. Instead, a room I had never seen, but somehow remembered. Wooden floorboards. A long table. 7 empty chairs. And at the head of the table, a throne of black branches. On it sat a woman with no mouth. Her face was smooth as ivory. But her eyes were open. And they were looking at me. Ansel's voice came like a thought in my skull. She can't sing. Not anymore. That's why she builds choirs. That's why she sends bells to fetch them. Then I won't sing, I said. It's not that simple. You already answered the rhyme. You already heard the 9th bell. I felt it, deep in my bones, a pulse, rhythmic and growing. I was becoming part of the song. Is there a way out? Only one, Ansel said. You must finish the 10th verse before she does. Write your own ending. And if I fail, you'll sing it forever. With her. Beneath the chapel. She gave me a piece of chalk made from bone. You'll find the walls. You'll know what to write when the time splits. I stepped back into Greyhollow proper. It was night now, though no stars shone. Only the bell. It floated above the chapel, no longer attached to any tower. It swung, but made no sound. Yet in my head, I heard the choir gathering. Preparing. And then I saw them, children, ghostly pale, climbing from the earth around the chapel. Their mouths sewn shut, but their throats pulsing. One of them was my mother. She saw me, and mouthed something I couldn't hear. But her eyes begged. I entered the chapel for the final time. The stairwell waited. Wider now. covered in runes that shifted when I blinked. And as I descended, the rhyme returned, sung not by children now, but by something ancient and wrong. 10 for the hand that holds the flame. 11 for the thief with no name. 12 for the choir who sang too deep. 13 for the bell that buried sleep. At the bottom, I found the room from the mirror. 7 chairs. The throne. And her. She rose when I entered, and opened her mouth, which had never been there. It tore across her face like a wound, and music spilled out. Not beauty, not sorrow, but devouring sound. It tried to pull my memories from my body, my name, my face, my breath. I dropped to my knees and drew with the bone chalk. A single word. The sound shattered. She screamed. The throne cracked. And the children froze. One by one, their stitches unseamed. They began to sing my song, not hers. And in that moment, I remembered the word I had written. Unwritten. The chapel exploded in light. And then, silence. I awoke in my bed at home. No bells. No fog. No Greyhollow. Only a white feather on my pillow. And a faint hum from beneath the floorboards. I thought it was over. Greyhollow had vanished like mist at dawn. I was back in my home, my own bed. The world was solid. No more backwards clocks. No flickering children. No faceless girls in the fog. But the feather remained. So did the hum beneath the floorboards. A hum too faint for the ears, but not the bones. Each night, it grew louder. And each morning, I woke more tired. As though I were singing in my sleep. On the 7th night, I heard it again. 10 for the hand that holds the flame. The rhyme returned, not from outside, but from within me. I opened my mouth. And it continued. 11 for the thief with no name. I wasn't speaking. Something inside me was reciting, using my lungs. I pressed my hands to my chest. My heart no longer beat. It pulsed in rhythm. A metronome for the song. I returned to my mother's belongings, the ones left in that iron chest after her funeral. Among her old letters and trinkets was something I hadn't seen before. A sheet of music. But the notes were written in blood. There were 13 lines. Only 12 had notes. The last was empty. Underneath it, in her handwriting, "You must write the 13th, before she does." I packed a bag and returned to the forest. Greyhollow should not have been there. Maps no longer marked it. But as I stepped deeper into the trees, the fog thickened. The branches twisted into arches. And at the 7th bend of the path, it appeared again. Greyhollow. Silent. Still. Waiting. The chapel was whole now. Towering. Its bell newly gilded. It tolled once as I arrived. And a cold voice whispered through the trees. You brought the 13th note with you. The choir stood outside. Pale children. Salt figures. Faceless women holding hands. And my mother. Still whole. Still silent. Her eyes met mine, pleading. I entered the chapel. Inside, the throne sat empty. The 7 chairs were occupied now, by aspects of myself. My rage. My fear. My hope. My guilt. My memory. My name. My silence. Only the 8th chair remained. It was shaped like a mirror. Ansel stood beside it. You finished your song, she said. But it's not enough, is it? She sings still. In the cracks of things. In the spaces between. Then what do I do? Ansel handed me the chalk again. This time, it was black. Write the note that doesn't exist, she whispered. The one between time and sound. The one she can't reach. I stepped forward. The floor trembled. The throne groaned. She began to rise. Her face was mine. But not as it is. As it would have been, if I had stayed. The mouth opened. The song began. It pulled the others from their chairs. My guilt screamed. My silence wept. My rage tried to flee. Only I remained. I knelt and wrote a note, not in music, but in absence. No sound came, and that was the point. The choir faltered. The children fell still. The chapel began to unmake itself. The bell tolled once, twice, 13 times. Each toll stole something back. My breath, my name, my time. And then it gave me choice. The faceless woman stepped down from the throne. She was no longer singing. She offered me her hand. "You wrote your own silence," she said. "You may leave now, or stay and keep the others quiet. And if I leave, the song waits. And if I stay, you become the 13th note, the one no voice can reach, the rest between worlds." I looked to my mother. She nodded once, tears in her eyes. She would go home now. Finally, I took the throne and closed my eyes. The chapel faded, the village unspooled, and Greyhollow became a pause in time, a breath that never ends. Some nights, if you listen carefully at the edge of sleep, you may hear a song you've never known, but somehow recognize. A choir with no faces. A hymn that never ends. But now, there's a silence at the heart of it. A silence I wrote.